there are hormone receptors all over our body. And when we're starting to lose our sex hormones, or we have an overproduction in certain of our sex hormones, it impacts all of our body systems. So our immune system changes, we become more inflamed, it can impact our mental health, brain fog, weight gain, insulin sensitivity. It impacts all of those different things. And it's only until this change starts to happen in our body that I think women really appreciate what our hormones have been doing for us all of those years.
Welcome to the Radical Health Rebel podcast. I'm your host, Leigh Brandon. This work started for me several decades ago when I started to see the impact I could make on people, helping them to identify the root cause of their health problems that no doctor could figure out, including serious back, knee, shoulder and neck injuries, acne and eczema issues, severe gut health problems, even helping couples get pregnant after several IVF treatments had failed. And it really moves me to be able to help people in this way. And that is why I do what I do and why we have this show. In this week's episode, entitled Have Radiant Energy and Feel Strong During Perimenopause and Menopause, Sheryl Carroll, an ex-banking professional turned integrative health practitioner and health coach, walks us through how she supports women in perimenopause and menopause to live with radiant energy and to feel strong and sexy in both body and mind. In this episode, Cheryl explains the hormonal shifts that occur in the second half of life and what changes women need to make to look and feel their best. Sheryl Carroll, welcome to the Radical Health Rebel podcast. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
I'm really looking forward to this episode. So Cheryl, to kick things off, if you could share with the audience an overview of your journey and, what led you to become a health coach.
So I'm actually a chartered accountant by profession originally. And, I had a great time in banking, traveling around the world, living in London, doing all the things, but it was never really my passion. And I've always been classified as the healthy one, the one who was always exercising, eating the salads when everybody was eating rubbish. And, something that really kind of fast forwarded my journey into this health space was probably one of the most traumatic events in my life to date, which was when I was pregnant with my daughter. My best friend here in Australia was diagnosed with bowel cancer and passed away when my daughter was 6 weeks old. And her and I had been the healthy ones, the ones who were always, we traveled together and we're always the ones looking for the healthy meals, doing the exercise together. And, that really rattled me, particularly given I just birthed a baby and now I had this additional responsibility of keeping a child safe. So I had this real desire to understand the true meaning of health because, all of a sudden I didn't feel like I knew what that meant because I just had this nagging feeling that it can't just be left to chance, that there were probably things that were happening in her body, some signs that stuff was going wrong that we all missed, that she missed because we were busy or just disconnected or whatever. So when I was on maternity leave with my son, I decided to do the Institute of Integrative Nutrition Health Coaching certification. And that was amazing because it kind of gave this really broad view of holistic health. It's not just, the food you put in your mouth. And through that, I started following another doctor, Dr. Stephen Cabral, who's based in the US. Have you heard of him?
Yep.
Do you know him? Okay, amazing. So I was in the first intake of his integrative health practitioner certification. And he brings together naturopathic medicine, functional medicine, Ayurveda, etc. And then I did his level 2 as well, which included, learning how to read labs, etc. So, really just having that understanding of the root cause of dis-ease in the body was very, very empowering for me. And then whilst working in the bank, I started doing health coaching part-time and I just loved it. I just knew that this was my thing and my passion. And so I left banking at the end of 2020 and then started this full-time when my daughter started school in the February of 21. And that's kind of been my journey in getting into integrative health.
Yeah, it sounds quite similar to my own story, really. I mean, slightly different, but I was always sporty. I was, in my 20s, I started hitting the gym, and, I was in an office job, very well paid job, or reasonably well paid job. I didn't dislike the office work that I was doing. I mean, I was incorporating IT that I'd learned at college, and I'd studied technical drawing at school, and I was using computer-aided design. But I loved being in the gym, and I loved the subject of nutrition. And it was just one day I happened to be in the gym. I was having dinner with a couple of the trainers there, and they said, "How do you know all this stuff? Like, you're really knowledgeable. Why don't you become a trainer?" And I was like, "Oh my God, I could actually work in the fitness industry and make a living." And it was like, that was my light bulb moment. So I didn't, obviously you had a slightly different trigger, if you want to call it that, in that, you had a friend, close friend that passed away. That sounds like that was almost your trigger. It's like, okay, I need to understand more about what's going on here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Probably to a degree was for yourself. It's like, well, if my friend can who's healthy can die of cancer, what about me?
No, absolutely. It was fear. It was actually fear driven. And, nothing helpful is going to come from a fear-based response. But
then obviously as you started to help other people, it was like, oh, wow, this is really for me, being able to take on this knowledge and help other people, as I know, gives you a lot of satisfaction.
Very much so. And it also, since I've been doing this now for a while, it's also allowed me to kind of piece together the puzzle of, I understand why I spent years auditing, because it's all about root cause analysis. And, it's as you know, in the work you do with your clients, it's all around connecting the dots and, being quite creative as to understanding what's going on for someone, because it's never a simple solution of it's this one thing that's causing somebody to feel in a certain way. And it's really understanding the whole person, from an emotional health standpoint, physical health, mental health, etc.
Definitely. So the main bulk of what we're going to discuss today is really around perimenopause and menopause. So before we dive into that, can you just explain what each of those are for anyone that might not fully understand what they are?
Yes, absolutely. So perimenopause is really the time before we hit menopause, menopause is described as when you haven't had a period for a full year. So if you haven't had a period for 8 months and then your period arrives, then you start the clock all over again. And perimenopause is the time before that these days, cautiously tracking it from around the age of 35, because we've got so much stress in the world that people are seeing quite a lot of hormonal dysregulation from as early as the age of 35. And when people think of menopause, they think of the hot flashes and, all of these different symptoms, but those are symptoms that occur in perimenopause. So perimenopause is also described as the second puberty. So it's puberty in reverse. So if you've got a daughter or you can remember when you went through puberty, it's really that whole experience going backwards. So your body's trying to recalibrate as your ovaries are deciding that they no longer want to produce the sex hormones. So there's this whole brain ovary connection going on where there's sometimes shouting, there's sometimes overproduction of estrogen. So it's a very topsy-turvy time and quite an unpredictable time for women, and they can feel quite out of control because they don't necessarily understand what's going on in their bodies.
And also, obviously, we'll come on to talk more about it in more detail, but obviously once a woman's gone through menopause, that also has effects on health as well.
Yes, because I think until women start to go through this perimenopausal transition, there isn't really this appreciation for the different roles that our sex hormones play in our body. We just think about it in terms of having a baby or not having a baby and trying not to have a baby when you don't want to have a baby. And actually, there are hormone receptors all over our body. And when we're starting to lose our sex hormones or we have an overproduction in certain of our sex hormones, it impacts all of our body systems. So our immune system changes, we become more inflamed, it can impact our mental health, brain fog, weight gain, insulin sensitivity. It impacts all of those different things. And it's only until this change starts to happen in our body that I think women really appreciate what our hormones have been doing for us all of those years.
Yeah, I mean, it also increases the likelihood of heart disease, doesn't it? And osteoporosis as well, are two big ones.
Yeah, like we lose muscle, so sarcopenia is a big thing. And then with that also comes osteoporosis and the loss of bone strength.
So why would you say, what didn't women need to change during this phase of life? What would you say?
So I think the main message is that, when we hit this perimenopause transition, we can't do what we've always done. So, I think the first thing that I see that women start to experience in perimenopause is that, and what drives them to take action is they start to put on a bit of weight. And they're like, oh my gosh. And then they start to reduce their calories. And then they start to exercise more, which is generally, the running, like they start hitting the road, pounding the pavement. And they just start putting on more weight and feel more fatigued. So I guess the main thing is that because our hormonal profile is changing, we cannot do what we did in our early 30s and 20s when we wanted to lose weight. There's a really fine balance between stressing the nervous system and really supporting our body to be able to function well. And very often what I see is that women actually aren't eating enough or eating enough of the right things. So, it's, if you think about it, so the ovaries are giving up the primary sex hormone, are giving up being the primary sex hormone producing gland and handing over responsibility to the adrenals. So if you are highly stressed, the adrenals are not going to be able to pick up the slack and then start to produce the sex hormones. So when you think about lifestyle, it's all about, stress management. Like, how do you reduce the amount of stress that you have on your body? And, poor nutrition, over exercising or under exercising, mental and emotional stress all adds stress to the stress bucket. And I think what I see is that women going into perimenopause in a very stressed state, that is when all the symptoms are exacerbated as well. And that's my own experience. That's why I'm in this space, is because I think it was around the age of 41, 42, I started to notice symptoms for myself, and I started to experience these perimenopausal symptoms quite early, because when I was in London, I was very into marathon running, completely over-exercised, and I lost my period for a number of years. And then that has played an impact into like my hormonal shifts later on. So, and also having young kids, didn't sleep, my stress and my stress bucket was just completely overflowing. And the first hormone that starts to decline in perimenopause is progesterone. And that's the lovely calming hormone that really helps us with sleep in the second half of our cycle, helps with kind of calming. So when that goes, there's like increases in the levels of anxiety, etc. And the more stressed you are, the lower that progesterone is. So,
and also the temperature changes and the hot flashes at night also affects sleep, which is also adding more stress to the body as well.
Yeah. And that happens when in the early parts of perimenopause, when progesterone is going down, people do have these temperature issues because of estrogen dominance. But further down the line, when you get closer to menopause, the hot flashes are driven by lower estrogen. So then those kind of come on at any stage as well, not just necessarily the night sweats overnight. But when you think about lifestyle, I break it down into the 3 pillars of nutrition, movement, and then stress management. And stress management is physical, mental, and emotional stress. And I always want to focus on that as being the most important pillar, because if you are stressed to the max, you're not going to be digesting your food properly. Exercise that you do is probably going to be more detrimental than good, because we're used to doing things like running or F45. Do you have F45 in the UK?
Not heard of it.
Or like CrossFit or more like HIIT type of training where you're training in this moderate intensity zone, which just adds more to the stress on the body. So those are really the pillars that I work with my clients on. So do you want me to maybe go into any of those, or do you have specific questions?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I was just going to add, it's kind of similar to the approach that I use. I don't know if you're familiar with Paul Chek's 4-doctor model.
Yeah.
So it's kind of similar in that, when we look at, so there's the 4 doctors of Dr. Happy, Dr. Quiet, Dr. Diet, Dr. Movement. And obviously the first thing always is, from my approach is, what makes the person happy, because you need something to focus on to actually change the other 3, right? Because if there's no motivation there, you're not going to do it. So it's not going to work. And then when you're talking about exercise, if someone's overly stressed, what we don't want to do is work them out necessarily, because working out is more stress. What we want to do is work in, because that way you're actually cultivating energy in the body rather than using it. And then obviously Dr. Quiet is all about sleep and rest and de-stressing. So that's kind of your stress part of the equation.
Bucket, yeah.
Obviously nutrition's really important. I don't think anyone can eat a poor diet and be healthy. So, making sure that someone's eating not just a high quality diet, but diet that's right for them as well. We're all different. We all require different nutrients. So yeah, it's quite similar. But yeah, if you want to go into more detail about your approach, that'd be great.
So it's really, so my approach is based on, the latest research around supporting women in this perimenopausal phase. And really what it is setting you up for success in menopause as well. So everything you learn within perimenopause is really the lifestyle that's going to carry you through menopause and, for the rest of your life. So from a nutrition standpoint, I guess the main areas of focus that I want women to think about is getting enough protein in. When I ask somebody what they're having for breakfast, it's like 1 egg and maybe some avocado. I'm like, no, that's not enough protein. We need to hit that 30 grams of protein threshold. And for those women who prefer plant-based proteins, that can be quite difficult. So, generally when that's the case, I'm going to be helping them, implement smoothies so that they can actually just get some protein powder. And even though, that's processed, it's really just helping them hit that protein threshold. Blood sugar balancing, because we do become more insulin resistant, like really important to eat those balanced meals, having your carbs around your exercise to make sure you're fueling your muscles well. And then, potentially carbs at night as well, just to help, with sleep, etc. But really focusing on, the basics of good nutrition, whole foods. We want to stay away from the processed stuff. A lot of women are more predisposed to autoimmune conditions in midlife because the hormonal shifts change the immune system. So, anti-inflammatory nutrition is going to be supportive of any woman going through this hormonal shift. So, getting rid of the gluten, potentially the dairy as well, is generally what I advise women to work on. And good quality fats, really important. And, then from a nutrition standpoint, it's not just about, what you put on your plate. It's around your meal timings. So, the constant snacking. Remember back in the day when snacking was seen as, the thing that props up your metabolism, really just helping women to try and get the 3 meals a day and doing the overnight fast. Intermittent fasting is a great tool when it fits into somebody's lifestyle. But what I find with women in perimenopause, they're juggling work, family, maybe aging parents. Like there's a lot of stress. So these other stresses on the system can just be too much, and then you don't get the benefits. So it's really assessing somebody's lifestyle and load as to whether something like extended fasting works for them. And then the final component around nutrition is really eating in a calm state. So mindful eating, calming the nervous system before eating so that you can get the real benefits of what you're eating.
When 35-year-old Amanda first scheduled to see me, she'd been suffering for 19 years from severe IBS, diarrhea and fecal incontinence, along with abdominal pain and bloating. Her condition had not only made life uncomfortable for Amanda, but very inconvenient as she had to walk 2 hours to work every day along a route that had public toilets, and she'd never been on holiday as an adult because of her condition. The only advice that several doctors and specialists had given Amanda was to take Imodium, and when she first saw me, she was taking 5 Imodium a day and wasn't getting any better. To help Amanda, I ran tests to find out what foods were right for her metabolic type, to see which foods she was sensitive to, and to assess her gut microbiome. Tests showed that Amanda had several food sensitivities and a parasite infection. Over the coming weeks, I coached Amanda to eat right for her type and to replace the foods she was sensitive to, and a protocol to deal with her parasite infection. And after 3 months, Amanda was IBS-free, and she also reported her skin was much improved and she had lost weight. And she booked a holiday for her and her husband to New York, as they'd never been on a proper honeymoon because of her IBS. And if you're suffering like Amanda was, and you want to get to the root cause of your problem, you can arrange a consultation with me at www.bodycheck.co.uk. And if we're a good fit, I could help you achieve the same kind of results as Amanda. Now, back to the podcast.
Yeah, that sounds great. And obviously, one thing that you've mentioned is, for a lot of women going through those phases, it's probably not a good idea that they go and, work out hard necessarily because they're already overly stressed. What kind of advice would you give them in terms of getting some movement in the body?
So I do recommend exercise, but it's about timing it to your menstrual cycle if you can. And really because your period is coming and going in perimenopause, you don't have a regular cycle necessarily to tie your training to. However, if you can, so when somebody has their period, their hormones are very low. So they are most like a man at this point in their cycle. So this is when they do have more flexibility to hit it hard in the gym. So I would say, the first maybe 2 weeks after they've had a period, if they do have a period, is when they can hit it hard in the gym. But when I say hit it hard, what I like women to focus on is strength training. So if they have, worked with somebody to make sure that their pelvic floor is functioning well, that they've got the right movement patterns, then they can work on building their strength by using heavier weights, because, that's going to help with the whole sarcopenia issue, the whole osteoporosis issue. So I like women to have resistance training as being the main focus of their training program, but then adding in, mobility, stability, flexibility, all really important as well. And from a cardiovascular perspective, doing short sprints is also a very good hormetic stress. But once again, it goes to the point of what else is going on in your life. If you're overstressed, underslept, then doing a huge number of sprints is not going to serve you. You're not going to get the results that you're looking for. And then rather just defer to zone 2 cardio, maybe where you're going for, super, super slow run. Try and do that run where you're just breathing through your nose. So you really are just keeping your heart rate very low, or just walk.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of women will notice that they're over exercising or pushing it too much. They'll start to get frustrated because their body will feel inflamed and will be holding on to excess weight. And that's a cue to actually just scale things back a bit and you will then see your inflammation coming down and achieving the body that you want. So it's really a switch of perspective that we have to be smashing ourselves in every session. And, when you are in an exercise rhythm, it's about doing the self-check-in to ensure that how are you showing up in the rest of your life? Are you irritable? Are you not sleeping well? Are you feeling puffy and inflamed? And if that's the case, then perhaps it's time to tone back on the exercise and maybe do, more walking, yoga, Pilates, giving yourself a bit of a deload, and then you can, focus on it again.
I mean, one of the things that I hear a lot from clients that I'm working with that are going through perimenopause, and again, I mentioned it briefly earlier, is, they go to bed, they get really hot, they pull the duvet off, then they get freezing cold, so they put the duvet back on, they get boiling hot, and obviously that greatly affects their sleep. Is there any advice you would give to women in those situations?
So it's important for them to look at their triggers, because there can be things that are driving those, like the hot flashes. So, alcohol is an obvious one, spicy food as well, maybe eating too close to bedtime, like anything that's stimulating the body. But it could also be that this is in the second half of their cycle and their progesterone is very low and they just actually need a bit of bioidentical hormone therapy support, because then it's the progesterone that's helping to offset that estrogen that's going to then help reduce those sorts of symptoms. So I think it's maybe taking a step back and just to see if there are any patterns around lifestyle. And then if you've kind of done your review of your lifestyle and there's really no pattern, but it's only at a certain time of your cycle, so in the second half of your cycle, if you still have a regular cycle, then it may be time for you to think about supporting yourself either through herbs. So there's a herb called Vitex that has been proven to support progesterone levels. So maybe starting with something like that. And then also, if you are open to hormone therapy, to work with your doctor to get a prescription for bioidentical progesterone therapy, just as a starting point, just to see if that helps. Because, as we know, sleep is so important that it's really about trying to optimize like your environment. So do all the basic sleep hygiene things as a starting point, not sleeping with too much, so that you get that, super, super hot feeling. And then, just track to see if there's anything from a lifestyle perspective that's driving it before you go down the route of maybe supporting yourself through herbs or hormones.
Yeah, for sure. So are there any other kind of stress management pieces of advice that you might give to people that we haven't mentioned yet?
Yeah. So just one thing I didn't mention from a nutrition standpoint is really the need to support your gut in perimenopause as well. So I know that you really focus on gut health as well with your clients, but there's a part of the microbiome that's called the estrobolome that's responsible for metabolizing our hormones. So gut health is really important to make sure that we are getting rid of the excess hormones that we don't need in our bodies, because the more we have recirculating hormones, the more we're going to have these issues like the hot flashes and the sore breasts and the irritability, etc. So when it comes to estrogen, whatever we don't use, we want to lose, which means metabolism through the liver and then final excretion through the gut. So that's really important. So lots of good fibrous veggies, legumes, if you can handle those, etc. So diversity of plant food is really important when it comes to gut health, which I know you probably preach as well. So that's from a nutrition point. We've spoken about movement. So from a stress management standpoint, I like to talk about, things that physically stress the body. And we obviously need to talk about toxins when it comes to that, because a sluggish liver and a high toxic load, which often are xenoestrogens, which act like estrogen in our body, are only going to make hormonal issues worse. So working your lifestyle in a way that supports detoxification on a daily basis is hugely beneficial for a woman in perimenopause, menopause, but everybody in general. So, you know, things like dry brushing, sweating, sauna, cruciferous vegetables, lemon water, you know, all of those different things just to support your different detox pathways is very important. Making sure you go into the toilet every day, full evacuation, etc. And then, you know, I recommend my clients to do a liver detox. So the Equilife, Dr. Cabral's Equilife detox on a quarterly basis, because that just really helps to, you know, reduce the toxic load, clear things out, and gives us a nice clean slate to start moving forward with. Because the issue is when you have clogged detox pathways, then you're going to have these recirculating hormones, including cortisol, overnight as well. And that can be the reason why people wake up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, which I know is a big thing for women in perimenopause. So yes, it's the heat, but then it's also like, ding, why am I awake at 3 o'clock in the morning consistently? And very often it's got to do with the toxic load. So it's supporting the detox organs, but it's also trying to reduce your exposure of toxins just generally. So choosing natural skincare products, personal care products, cleaning products, leaving your windows open, getting an air purifier if you're in a very densely populated area. Really just thinking about how you can reduce your exposure to toxins. I think here in Australia, where I live in Sydney, mold is a huge thing. There's been a lot of flooding. So, you know, if you're exposed to mold, I know that it happens a bit in the UK as well, like really trying to get rid of that in your environment, because that can be highly toxic for us as well.
Yeah.
So just being aware of that.
I've actually done an episode on mold in the home. So
oh, brilliant.
Look
okay.
back at that, they can.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, it's a really big thing that's impacting a lot of people these days. I think the mold is getting crazy because we're trying to block it with like mold-free paints and all of that, and it's just coming back more fierce than ever. So that's from a physical stress perspective. Other things to think about are, you know, so we spoke about gut health, but also where you have, you know, bacterial overgrowth or candida or anything in your system. Parasites is huge for people as well. I know it's not a nice thing to think about, but any issues with your gut releases toxins into your system and is a physical stress on your system. Circadian disruption is also another physical stress. So really trying to optimize your light exposure. So light in the morning, reducing your exposure to light at night, getting into bed at a consistent time is all going to help just reduce the stress on your body. And then the final piece of the kind of stress puzzle is the mental and emotional stress. And you know, mindset is such a huge part of our ability to cope with stress. And I'm sure you talk about this so much as well. And, you know, how we approach things and how we perceive things is what drives our stress response. So it's really being aware of our triggers and trying to reframe the things that are causing us stress. So the starting point is really awareness. So you know, when I work with clients, mindset is such a huge part of the puzzle, not just from a stress management standpoint, but more from supporting them to step into a better version of themselves.
It's interesting because my latest book comes out next month, and it's actually to help people with acne.
Congrats.
Thank you. So it's about helping people with acne, but there's actually a whole section on mindset, and that comes first, because without that, you know, the chances are you're not going to do the things you need to do unless your mind's in the right place.
Exactly. And I think it's, you know, holding that picture of your future self there, very visible, and that's what you're working towards, and that future version of yourself is not reactive, and is not, so it's really trying to act from that future version of yourself. But I think the best way that I found for myself and with clients is to have these grounding routines. So you have a morning routine, which is setting you up for success for the day. Anchor points in the day, which bring you back into the present moment, out of the mind, back into the body, whether it's breath work or a quick walk in nature, or whatever, listening to a song that is really uplifting for you. Very important. And then, the final piece of the puzzle is your evening routine, which is closing off your day, reflecting on the day, the wins, the learns, gratitude, so that you're closing off the day, so that you can go to bed with, having closed off the day without taking any of the other stuff, and really celebrating, I guess, what you've achieved in the day. Is, it's really just trying to reframe the mindset to away from the lack to, everything that we have. So that's really important.
I mean, we're naturally wired to be pessimistic, right? That's a survival mechanism. So you've got to kind of learn techniques to
practice.
It.
Totally.
Yeah.
I first met Amelia at a health club where I was hosting an event offering back screenings to the members. The first thing I noticed about Amelia was a dullness in her eyes, which I later realized was due to extreme pain, and I noticed that she was unable to turn her head and had to turn her whole body if she wanted to look in a different direction. Amelia informed me that she had a history of repeated shoulder and neck pain for the last 2 years and was diagnosed with spinal stenosis at C4-5, C5-6, and C6-7, and a stenosis is a blockage which in Amelia's case was in the spinal canal of her neck, irritating her spinal cord. She had extreme tenderness over her neck and trapezius muscles on both sides, and she suffered from severe neck pain continuously. Amelia informed me that she'd been advised that spinal surgery was the only option, but the surgery came with great risks, including potential paralysis, and no guarantee of success, which made Amelia fearful of the surgery. In addition to this, Amelia suffered from continuous exhaustion, painful intestinal gas and bloating, even though she felt she was following a healthy diet. After a thorough evaluation, I designed Amelia a corrective exercise, nutrition, and lifestyle plan, plus I referred her to a Nuka chiropractor for specific adjustments to her neck. After following the plan religiously, Amelia is much stronger and much more flexible than she's ever been before, and no longer suffers from repeated neck pain and has full range of motion in her neck. Amelia also reported that her energy was maximized and that she no longer suffers from the gripping stomach pains that had dominated her life for a very long time. If you're suffering like Amelia was and you'd like to find out more about getting to the root cause of your pain, go to www.bodycheck.co.uk, that's bodychek.co.uk, to request your consultation.
And I also do a lot of, I collaborate a lot with practitioners who specialize in emotional health, because that's a big thing that I see for women in perimenopause. So the hormones are very supportive of kind of helping us keep our shit together when we are, in our reproductive years, because our responsibility is to really care for others and not to focus on ourselves. And as you move into the perimenopause phase, we don't have the protection of those hormones that is helping to balance us. So stuff becomes more obvious where it is triggering, where we have unresolved stuff, where we potentially haven't had the right boundaries in place. And, it can bring up a lot of anger, people showing up in a way that's like, oh, where did that come from? And, I think having a practitioner who specializes in supporting people with working through their emotions and having a healthy relationship with their emotions, working through unresolved trauma, is a very big piece of the perimenopausal puzzle that I've seen and experienced myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Emotions is definitely a very important part of the puzzle. Just moving on. Now, again, you mentioned earlier about potentially needing to use bioidentical hormones. But before we talk a bit more about that, what kind of tests do you normally run, and what tests do you think are important for women going through perimenopause and menopause?
So if somebody has the finances, I really like to run a Dutch test, which is it's a urine-based test that looks at, so it gives you an idea of your hormone levels, and you can also marry that to what comes back with the blood tests. But the most important thing is it shows you your cortisol curve. So it shows you your adrenal function, but it also shows you how your hormones are being metabolized and where you have potentially some problematic areas that can be optimized through various lifestyle changes or through supplementation. And that is a very powerful tool to be able to support people if they do, first of all, to reduce like risk of the female cancers, because there are certain pathways that damage DNA and that predisposes somebody to things like the female cancers. And if you know that, then you can change the way those pathways work through different supplementations. Excuse my dog. And sorry, I must close the door for him. And so that is very, very powerful. And also, if somebody is then interested in going down the route of hormone therapy, knowing what your pathways are and the ability to ensure that they are flowing in a more favorable way is going to reduce your risk. Because if you think about it, you're just adding more hormone into your system. And if your body isn't set up to metabolize the hormones properly, then, you know, there is more risk there in that. So it's really just giving people awareness onto how to optimize their body's utilization of their hormones. So that's a test that I run. And then also just using the blood test. So it's difficult to get an accurate reading within perimenopause because the hormones can swing about, but it's important to get a baseline for you to then work with if you are going to be adding in hormone therapy. So that's really what it is. So in perimenopause, I always encourage women to go, particularly after the age of, 40, 42 or whatever, to really go based on their symptoms. Because if your bloods come back and they look normal, but you feel far from normal, rather go on your symptoms, because things are swinging about.
Yeah. But obviously, I'm sure you'll agree what I'm about to say. The important thing is to get everything else in place first before you consider any kind of hormone therapy.
I agree. And I think it's, another test that if somebody has the finances to do would be a gut test. I really want somebody's gut functioning well before they go on any hormone therapy. Like if they have got gut issues, that they are highly constipated, like that's not a good scenario for somebody. Like to your point, their body needs to be functioning well. They need a low toxic load. They need their liver working well so that it can metabolize the hormones. It's really like lifestyle first, understand how to optimize your health, because somebody's symptoms may diminish significantly once they have actually reduced their stress, for example, or they have reduced their toxic burden. And then they've got a new baseline, and it actually wasn't the hormonal shifts that were driving it. It was actually that they were demanding too much of themselves and they were feeling run down because they weren't prioritizing enough recovery, for example. So it's really about trying to support people to optimize their lifestyle and then add in what's needed from a hormone therapy perspective. Because add in too many hormones and it's going to have the opposite effect. Somebody is going to feel they're not going to feel good. They're not going to achieve what their goal is.
And I know this is a bit of a contentious issue, but what are your views on synthetic versus biodynamic hormone therapy?
I personally would not use a synthetic hormone. I personally would use, and I would never, recommend my clients to go into a conversation with their doctors to utilize that as synthetic hormones. I think when it comes to hormones, people are so nervous around, and rightly so, around cancer. And I personally feel that bioidentical hormone therapy 100% mimics our hormones and how our body can utilize them. A synthetic, don't know. You just don't know. And what else is it, what else is it compounded with? So yeah, I personally would not use synthetic hormones.
And what supplements do you find helpful with menopause?
It is so dependent on where somebody is at and, what their diet is like, how well they're digesting their food. I feel like where women are always in a rush and they never have time, actually supporting their digestion with the digestive enzymes can really help with getting the best out of their food so that they can absorb all the, the amino acids, etc., from the protein that they're eating, and the various, micronutrients. So that would be something if somebody is eating in a way that they're quite stressed, they're always doing two things at once. Magnesium is another supplement that most of us are deficient in and can really help with sleep in the second half of our cycle. So magnesium glycinate, threonate, citrate at night, very helpful all the way through the cycle. It can also help when people have migraines and things like that. And then it actually just depends on somebody's lifestyle as well. Like I just assume that everybody is quite stressed at the moment. So, B vitamins, always very helpful because we're probably flying through them. Vitamin C, depending on somebody's light exposure and ability to get sun on their skin. Vitamin D. And, the adaptogens.
Vitamin D is definitely an issue in northwestern Europe because we don't
exactly
get sunshine.
You don't get sun. And the other one, sorry, before I move on to adaptogens, is omega-3 fatty acids. We are not eating enough fatty fish, and the fish all has plastic in it. So generally we need to supplement just to get, and also because our levels of inflammation are going up with perimenopause and menopause, we really need to support our inflammatory response by bringing that down with omega-3 fatty acids. And then the other category of supplementation that I love are adaptogens. There's so many different types that are either stimulatory or calming. Ashwagandha is a great one, which does a bit of both. Rhodiola, the mushrooms, reishi, incredibly calming. Lion's mane for cognition, amazing research on lion's mane. So those are really tools that women can play around with, but recognizing that when you decide to start supplementing, it's not going to be a quick fix, that it's, commit to using a protocol for 3 months, 6 months, because it's really, that's how long it takes for your body to rebalance. So don't expect you to have a complete switch over in a week and then give up. So I think it's really about, with all of these lifestyle habits, it's really about consistency, but tracking your progress as well, just to make sure that what you're taking is helping. And then I guess the final category as well is just supporting your gut health. So, whether that's through prebiotic fiber supplements or really focusing on microbial diversity and adding in some glutamine powder for leaky gut. Like gut health focus is really important.
No, completely agree. If, if someone's just approaching that time of life, or perhaps they're in the middle of it, where should they start? What would be the first step for those people, would you say?
I would really encourage them to get educated. Like, there are so many incredible books out there at the moment by authors like Lara Briden, Marisa Snyder, and they outline this hormonal change very easily to understand, in a way that's very easy to understand. So, getting educated around what's going on in your body or what's to come is very important, because you can't outsource your health outcomes to a practitioner. I know in various places in the world, doctors are completely overrun. They aren't well educated in menopause. They get very little training on menopause. So it's really important for a woman to not become a doctor, but to know enough about what to look out for, what changes need to happen, and really just to do a bit of a lifestyle audit and be like, okay, well, maybe I'm, doing HIIT classes 7 days a week. Is this really serving me? Thinking about how they want to feel, and then doing a bit of a lifestyle audit to think about what areas they need to change. Like, if I could give anyone advice, it's really focus on it before you hit 40, because if you've optimized your lifestyle for what's required in perimenopause, by the time you hit 40, you are going to minimize the negative effects of some of these hormonal shifts, because your body is going to be ready and supported through lifestyle to be able to weather the storm that's coming.
Awesome. I mean, one thing that I've looked into a little bit, but not a lot, is the changes that also occur with the vaginal microbiome during menopause. Is that something that you've looked into at all?
Yeah, very much so. So, I mean, it's interesting because the whole pelvis actually changes with menopause. So there's like a whole shift that's happening downstairs with, there's like vaginal atrophy. So the muscles around the vagina also starts to deteriorate. So there's a huge issue with incontinence and everything as well. And then there's also the change in the vaginal microbiome. So a lot of women can start to suffer with severe UTIs that are recurring. And I think the thing just to recognize is that when you take antibiotics to address a UTI, it's killing off all the good bacteria as well. So really thinking about your holistic microbiome, and perhaps, what I recommend if women do have recurring UTIs, even if it's in menopause, to actually do a gut microbiome test, because there's likely issues in your actual gut microbiome. And by doing a protocol to rebalance that, you're going to be supporting the vaginal microbiome as well. And there are some specific strains of probiotics that have been proven to support the vaginal microbiome. So that's also an avenue that somebody can go down more from a preventative standpoint as well.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I mean, there's one of the companies that I use for testing and for supplements in the UK, they've got, testing for the vaginal microbiome, and they've got, as you said, specific probiotic strains that can really help with that as well.
Amazing. So have you had some of your clients have that issue?
A few. Yeah, not. I mean, it's relatively new science, isn't it, in terms of the testing and the science on probiotics, etc. So I wouldn't say I've done lots of clients with those issues, but yeah, a small number I have.
Okay.
So, what would you say would be your top kind of 3 takeaway tips for women, kind of either in or approaching that phase of life?
So my first tip is to not fear this shift. When I first realized that I was in perimenopause, I had a huge wobble thinking that it was the end of my life. But actually, it's a very, very powerful time for us to reconnect with ourselves. And if you can learn how to optimize your lifestyle build your toolkit really through the lifestyle strategies, supplementation, finding your healthcare team. And it's not going to just be one person. Acupuncture is amazing. Holistic health practitioners like myself, you need a GP for your hormone therapy, but building your team that you can trust to support you moving forward is going to arm you with what you need to really step into this next phase of your life with knowing what you want and, showing up the way you want to for the rest of your life. It's like the second half of your life. It's amazing. So if you get into that phase of life feeling good in your body and knowing yourself better, it's such a gift. And, I guess what makes me quite sad is that if women lose themselves through this process, it's such a loss to society, because women who know themselves with so much experience and wisdom, they've got so much to share with the world. So I think it's really, leaning into that, and really knowing that, yes, you may be, reaching the second half of your life, but you've got so much to give to the world. So that is number one. Number two is knowing that recovery and rest is such an important part of this journey. And sometimes that means saying no to things. And, I'm still working on this, like trying to match my output with recovery, but your body will feel like it's failing you if you don't give yourself enough time for rest and recovery.
Yes.
Like if you want to perform well, there has to be that balance.
Yeah, there's a saying that your yes has no value until you learn how to say no.
Love that. Absolutely. Yeah.
And
so boundary work is huge.
I do find that is a real issue for I was going to say women, but particularly mothers. That is a real issue. That they're always giving themselves away to look after other people, but they're sacrificing themselves at the same time.
Absolutely. And I think that's probably the last message is you absolutely have to put your oxygen mask on first. And, taking the time to learn about this phase and to make the changes that you need. And yes, that may mean that you're going to take an hour away from the family to maybe go to a yoga class. That's okay, because you are going to be a better version of yourself. And that is a gift to everybody around you. So yeah, really, really important message. And I guess that goes, and that's why I'm so passionate about what I do. I've lost a friend. I've lost a friend who wasn't connected to the messages from her body. And I feel like women and mothers in particular, they only take action when there's a crisis. And if I can inspire one person to take action now when maybe their only issue is they are slightly hot at night, like amazing. Like it's so much easier to improve your health from a place of not being in crisis.
Yeah, I mean, I've had that conversation so many times with women in their sort of late 30s and in their 40s that, you've got to put yourself first. You've got to put your own oxygen mask on first, because as you said, the best version of you is going to be the best mother to your children as well. And not only that, but you're also going to be inspiration to your children, rather than showing your children that when they grow up, they have to give themselves away to other people as well, rather than living their own life.
Absolutely. And they model our behavior. So, and I think if it's what I find so much with the women I work with is that their why behind the change is always outside of themselves. It's, I want to be this for my family, because they struggle to value themselves enough until they've gone through the process. So if that's the motivation for now, that's amazing. But, you should also just be doing it for yourself too.
Absolutely. So what's next for you, Cheryl?
So I absolutely love supporting women in perimenopause. So I've created a program with an exercise physiologist, which is called Shapeshifters. So that is a group coaching program for women. And yeah, it's amazing. So it's really all of these strategies, and we coach them through implementing these lifestyle changes. I also work with women one-on-one. I've also more recently niched into autoimmune. So really supporting women with things like rheumatoid arthritis, thyroid issues, which is massive for women in perimenopause as well. Really like the complexity of really helping women unpack autoimmune conditions and helping them move to a place of remission. So that's my passion project at the moment.
And you're very welcome to come back, and we'll do an episode on autoimmune conditions as well.
Amazing. I'd love that.
And where can people find you online, Sheryl?
Yes. So my business name is Your Tiny Voice, which is all about connecting to your intuition. And so my website is ytvhealthcoaching.com. Instagram is your_tiny_voice, and Facebook is YTV Health Coaching. So yes, please reach out if anybody's interested in doing a 30-minute complimentary health strategy session. Yeah, just message me and we can connect.
Awesome. Sheryl, thank you so much. I really, really enjoyed our conversation today, and I'm looking forward to getting you back on.
Yay. Well, thanks for having me.
No problem at all. So that's all from Sheryl and me for this week. But don't forget, you can join me same time, same place next week on the Radical Health Rebel podcast.
Thanks for tuning in. Remember to give the show a rating and a review, and I'll see you next time.